guys, Jay here, welcome to Eons of Battle, and I am actually somewhat lukewarm excited for Codexes. Not specifically the Codexes, but what they're gonna bring to Warhammer 40,000, because I have really been enjoying 10th edition, and what I really love about 10th edition is the keywords and detachments. Not incredibly used right now with the index rules, but I think that they're really telling of things to come. Now, Warhammer 40,000 has always kind of been a mess. But why has it always been so much fun and exciting and awesome is because Games Workshop is always coming out with new models that, without any real thought processes of what each army actually needs, they only focus on fun. In 6th edition, it was all about bringing out these new big vehicles in the form of monstrous creatures. They would always have them be monstrous creatures because the vehicle rules sucked. In 7th edition, it was all about army detachments that gave you access to free units in exchange for taking certain groupings of things, which was very fun and flavorful, and absolutely broke the game badly. But that's what makes Warhammer so awesome, is that it's really focused on fun. And Warhammer 40,000 has become so big and so unwieldy that I now see an actual usable framework that everything has been laid on top of, and that is detachments and keywords. Now, detachments are excellent because they give army-wide special rules to your faction as long as everything is put together properly in the list building stage. Specifically with the Space Marines, all Space Marines have access to just Space Marine Oath of Moments, where they're really good at focusing down one thing a turn. Perfect for Space Marines, very tactical, very fluffy, but then you have your choice of detachment. Right now, there's the Gladius detachment, which is just the generic Space Marine one where you can cycle through these different buffs throughout the game. Pretty decent, but what has me really excited is the Black Templar detachment, the Righteous Crusade detachment, which gives you an option of buffs in which you can pick exactly in what way you want to punch really hard in melee combat. I would love to see that across all armies. Right now, the Black Templars are really the only ones to get that sort of treatment, which also, big props to the Black Templar for being the coolest Space Marines ever. Like, literally, the Space Marines aren't even a first founding chapter. Like, they never participated in the Horus Heresy. Like, for years and years and years, Black Templar were just over there with like the Flesh Terrors and the Crimson Fists as those Space Marine chapters that you've never heard of. But they were so badass that now we are the poster boys of Space Marines, and I absolutely love it. But I think that this detachment ability can actually let you have those smaller factions inside of super factions. Space Marines are obviously the pinnacle of the super faction, where you have Space Marines at the top of the tier, and then as you work your way down, you've got like Blood Angels, White Scars, Crimson Fists, and all of those can have their own abilities without necessarily getting new data sheets. And if Games Workshop does want to actually make new models, instead of the entire range getting horribly bloated with all of these new things, and the new things do tend to be better, and even when they're not better, they're just different, and different does tend to throw a monkey wrench into the whole system. But the Black Templar specifically have access to essentially two things that the Space Marines don't get access to. They have the Crusader Squad and the Sword Brethren. And really, regular Space Marines do have access to these things in the form of just Assault Intercessors and Blade Guard veterans, but the Black Templar just have slightly cooler, slightly different versions of these things. And I think it'd be very easy now for Games Workshop to actually bring out more chapter-specific things and just not have them either be their own tiny little baby sub-faction that nobody plays because they're barely fleshed out, because Games Workshop can only release like 1 or 2 new model kits for that army per the year, while letting the whole range breathe a little bit, because the Black Templar are, they have their own detachment with their own detachment abilities that actually does make everything else in the Space Marine Codex a little more Black Templar-y. Everything across the board fights just a little bit better in close combat. Everything across the board is just a little bit better at fighting the evil, vile witches of the 41st millennia. And so even though the Space Marines and the Black Templar are almost the exact same thing, the Black Templar, they got their spice. They got their spice in the detachment and the keywords. And I would love to see something similar for all of the Space Marines and basically everything in Warhammer 40,000. Maybe the White Scars could have some special outriders, maybe with some like Power Lance type weapons that get sustained hits on the charge. Iron Hands could get a Terminator Sergeant for their Intercessor squads that can tank tons and tons of wounds and make the overall squad much more survivable and incredibly fluffy, because they used to be able to do that back in the good old days. And it just seems like that's kind of the direction that things are headed in, because looking at the Beast Nagas that came out in 9th edition for the orcs, if the Beast Nagas had come out in 6th or 7th, or probably even 8th edition, they would have been their own army. Just their own army that has like 4 units in it. They can sort of take and pick and choose from some of the orc lists, but really they're just their own baby little faction that doesn't exist. But they do exist. They're just regular orcs, and everybody can access them, everybody can play with them, everybody can have fun with them. But I could totally see down the line there being like a great green beast detachment that not only benefits the Beast Nagas, and for people who want to spam tons and tons of Beast Nagas or have a Beast Naga style list, it also will take all of the units in the Orc Codex and make them a little bit more Beast Naga-y. Without having to change any actual data cards for the army, you can just make them play like they feel like they should play. The Black Templar play like they feel like they should play, and it is awesome. And I want this feeling to be splashed out into all of the different factions of Warhammer 40,000. Things like Farsight Enclave for the Tau, a little bit more of a close combat focus thing. Or I guess that would be more Vior-La, which is the super hyper aggressive Tau. Weird things like the Eldar Exodites, the little dino riding Eldar. They could have their own detachment and maybe 1 or 2 new units that make them just feel like the old school weird Eldar Exodites should feel like. And I think that the detachments and the keywords are gonna be the thing that lets it actually work. Like, if anybody remembers back in the day when Tempestus Scions came out, they were their own army, but they really weren't. It's literally 3 kits, and one of those kits is a dual kit. And so you can spam the Tarox Prime and the Tempestus Scion and the Tempestus Scion leader hero team, and that was literally it. You could bring a Valkyrie for Funyun rings, but other than that, it was just kind of nothing. The same thing happened with the Harlequins, where, you know, they had a smattering of units and they could perform well in game, but they became really predictable because literally there is nothing to take. But a Harlequin detachment would let you take tons of Harlequins, make your Harlequins because you are a dedicated Harlequin detachment player, play a little bit better, and you still have access to pick and choose from the actual Eldar Codex, and those things that you pick are gonna be a little bit more on the Harlequin side of things. It just seems like an actually good system in place so that Games Workshop can do what they do, which is make really cool models and have the game not become an absolute mess. It's always gonna be a little rough around the edges because there's literally thousands of data cards, but still, the sliders available in a detachment is just like special rules that apply to particular models with keywords, as opposed to actually going in and saying, okay, we got it wrong, the toughness of this unit should really be a 3, they should have a leadership of 5 instead of 6, and they really should have a 2-up to hit on their gun. Like, you don't have to change any of those things because now you have the detachment abilities and the keyword abilities. So keyword Beast Naga, maybe they ignore the actual WOG, like the core mechanic of the Orc army, but they have their own version of a WOG, or they're just unbelievably good at killing beasts because they're the Beast Nagas. That's literally what they do, is they're the monster hunters of the orcs. It would be so great. And the reason that this has me really excited for the Codexes, I'm not necessarily excited for the Codexes because the Codexes have always been a little on the problematic side of things forever. It was really fun when I was getting into Warhammer 40k and buying like the 5th edition Codexes because it was my first experience with them. They were beautiful, they had tons of great artwork, they had the painting and modeling section towards the back of the book. It was great. And then I bought the 6th edition Codexes and the 7th edition Codexes, and they kept being the exact same thing. Even the 8th edition Codexes, when Games Workshop had its another big shift in the actual core mechanics of the game, it was still pretty much the exact same formula with the exact same lore copy and pasted from the 7th book into the 8th edition book. And it left a bad taste in my mouth. And we've also all experienced how perfect just digital rules for this game are. Nobody gets super upset when an index goes from index 1.0 to 1.1. You get it. They made some changes. The new changes are highlighted in red. You know, easy to do. It's really frustrating when your actual book gets DLC'd and then you have to Sharpie in the margins. This is actually how this rule works. I still find it a little bit fun to highlight and Sharpie and write things in the margins, but that should be my own prerogative, not you have to fix the codex before you start to play with the rules that are written in this codex. It's just not the best way to do things. And Games Workshop is kind of stuck in a corner. They know where their bread is buttered. They know that the codexes are just a way for them to print money, like literally print money, because it's a print medium. And so it's much better for them to be able to go new Necron Codex with the new Necron units coming out this winter. And which is, it just kind of works better for them than just dumping all of the rules available at once and then later on saying, right now we're focusing on the Tyranids. It's a little bit awkward, but we've all experienced how great free rules are, and the app, not the worst thing ever. Probably shouldn't be paywalled because it has one giant flaw, and that is that you actually have to input every single war gear every single time. It doesn't matter if all of your cultists have fists, you have to tell the app that you have 29 fists in the squad, even though it gives you an error report that you don't have the appropriate number of fists, so it knows you're wrong, but it can't just fix it for you. You actually have to go and fix it yourself. It's wild, and they're putting it behind a paywall, which you can have paywalled rules or you can have codexes. I feel like it's a pretty big ask to have both. Ugh. I am kind of excited to see what happens when these codexes start to come out. The Tyranids and the Space Marines are gonna come out this fall, and they're gonna have to be different, because Warhammer 40,000 is different now. My idea for codexes has always been the codexes should be giant tomes of lore and pretty pictures, and I think that people would still want to purchase these things just to have their army in their hands and just read forever about how badass their specific guys are. And maybe have the rules in there as well, but it's not a necessity. You still have the app, you still have the online indexes, you have PDFs, you have everything that you need, but you can buy these really cool books. Instead of, you probably sorta should get the book. The rules are available for free online. You really should probably get the book because it has the updated rules. And another big problem with the Codex is some armies are gonna have to wait for the better part of a year, if not years, to get their really cool treatment. I'm kind of excited to see if Eldar Exiles are gonna make their way into the game. Who knows when that might happen, because we have to wait for the physical Codex release before we get access to those rules. How much fun would it be if on a random Tuesday, Games Workshop was like, here's the Rhino Rampage detachment for the Space Marines. That sounds like fun. Maybe I'll try that out this weekend. That sounds like it'll be a ball. That would be so much fun, but just getting the Space Marine Codex in my hands and saying, oh, here's 8 detachments. I guess I'll just read them and pick the best one. It's usually what happens when everything is delivered in one giant chunk in terms of the gameplay. But I almost wish the Games Workshop could flip it, where the game is almost trickle-fed and the models are just delivered in one giant chunk. I don't think that's what's gonna happen, but I am very excited to see what these new codexes look like. I really hope they'll be different. Even if they're not incredibly different, they're gonna have some new things. These detachments and keywords are definitely going to be a big deal. And no matter what direction Games Workshop decides to go with these detachments, you're gonna need some really good terrain, and why not get the absolute best terrain, which is available on our Patreon. Over there, we have a new STL terrain set every single month, and this month we have the Corpse Starch Factory, an entire board full of machinery and servitors and lots of blood. We also make extra episodes of EOB, host live Discord hangouts, and we have a tier where you can get your name on one of my Space Marines and you can join the Immortal Crusade. We also stream twice a week on Twitch every Tuesday and Thursday from 5:30 to 8 p.m. Central Time. Come hang out and talk Warhammer, maybe talk about these detachments and some ideas for the future. I'm very excited to see what they're gonna do moving forward. I think that they finally have some bones that can actually support the game they've created, as opposed to just coming out with things in a fairly random format. I think that the detachments are actually gonna let the game breathe a little bit, and I kind of felt like Games Workshop was kind of at the end. Warhammer is done. There's already too many models for every single army. But now with detachments, I actually think Games Workshop has infinite range to expand for the future. Thanks for watching.